So, if you're an adult in modern society, particularly a young adult, but really any adult, you probably need a little CPR for your social life. And the reason I know that is that we live in this marvelous technological age where we have more social media contacts than ever before. But problem is, as described by the US Surgeon General, we are lonelier than ever. We have a literal epidemic of loneliness going on, which sounds utterly crazy to me, but that's the fact. So we can reach out anytime, anywhere to anybody, and yet we don't feel like we have those friendship connections that like we used to back in the day when we were kids and we were able to make friends just by tumbling out of the front of our house, and there were people there to play sports with or play board games with, or the kids sitting next to you at school in class all day, or you would go to dance class or your little league baseball team or whatever the heck it was. Making friends as a kid was at least a little bit easier. Now we hit adulthood, and I do find that people sometimes will be looking to make friends in all the wrong places. People will tell me, oh, I go out every weekend. I go to concerts. I'll go to a coffee shop. I'll go to clubs and I meet people, but they never become friends. Well, there's a huge reason for that. And that reason is that friendships require regularity. So you have to find a place where you can strike up conversations and talk with people on a regular basis. So you need to get really kind of intentional about what you're doing and, more importantly, where you're doing it. So the real thing that you need to do is take a good hard look at your life and examine what places you show up regularly and start looking for friends in those locations. I know it sounds like I'm stating the obvious, but people don't do the obvious. So it's time to start looking at that. So, what are places like that? First of all, where you live. So this means a place like an apartment complex, condo units, neighborhoods, living units at college. Any of those places are places where you can see people regularly. So you can regularly greet people, have a short little conversation, ask a question, drop a little bit of information. That's how these brief relationships get started. And with time, with regularity, these things can grow into actual longer conversations, or you can even issue an invitation at some point, but that can't happen very easily at a one-off. Okay, so where you live, obviously, that's one place. Another place is where you work. Now, I can just feel your eyes rolling into the back of your head with this, but where you work is still a very legit place to find friends. But people often will say, I've been working there forever and I don't know if this person's a work friend or a real friend. Okay, let me explain to you how you can tell. They're a work friend if the only place you do things with them is at work. The way you transition a work friendship to a real friendship is by doing something outside the place where you know them from. It's a work friendship until you take it out of the workplace. Fact. So, in that sense, you need to be a bit more intentional about your workplace conversations. So in other words, if you're friendly with someone, well, go out of your way to talk to them every day. So greet them at the beginning of the day. Stop by their desk in the middle of the day. Hey, how's it going? It doesn't have to be anything super long. At the end of the day, just say a little something to them or drop a bit of information about what you're going to be doing. Okay, so other places where you can develop some regularity, let me just say, at the gym. A better possibility at the gym is an actual class of some sort, like an exercise class, like a spin class, or some type of thing where people show up on a regular basis, and it would be a bit more natural to strike up a conversation at the beginning or the end. Again, nothing wrong with trying to strike up conversations at the gym, but you have to be a little careful as to how intense people are and if they're open to being approached. Another great example of regularity would be joining an outdoors club, something involving hiking or anything like that. Um, Speaking of interests, a hobby or interest group. But the key there is you don't just show up, you show up with the intent of having some conversations, not usually with just one person, but pick two or three people and, talk at the beginning, talk at the end. Be prepared to drop a bit of minor personal information about yourself in the hope that they will reciprocate and drop a little bit of information about themselves. Then you've got something to build on for future conversations. An adult ed class is great. It could be at a college, it could be something like painting or cooking, or it could even be, you're trying to go for an additional degree or a certification. People are showing up regularly for that. So go a little early, make it a point of talking to people, stay a little late. And then eventually it's like, oh, hey, I'm heading out for coffee after this. Would you like to join me? That's how things get started. Another example would be a professional group. If you're working in a particular profession and you join a group associated with that, real estate agents, accountants, whatever the heck it is, that's an opportunity to talk about your profession and get to know people better. Start asking some light personal questions. You don't want to get too deep with that, but asking a little bit about somebody's life is usually welcomed, especially if you drop a little information about yourself. Volunteer work could be another great place to meet people. Habitat for Humanity, animal rescue shelter. I do have to caution you, though, if you are a younger adult, say 20s, 30s, you probably don't want to end up with the older retiree crowd. So when it comes to volunteer work, get out there and test it, try it out. You don't I hate to be ageist about this, but you probably want somebody who's like at least ballpark in your age range. So for volunteer work, you do want to kind of test it out before you commit to it. Adult recreational sports. It could be something that maybe you used to play as a kid, or it could be something even more casual than that. Some cities have adult kickball leagues. You don't usually have to be, a superstar athlete to get involved with that. But anything with adult recreational sports, and particularly co-ed, I think that offers even more opportunity for socializing and making friends. Community theater, like lots of cities, small cities, big cities, even towns will have community theater. And it's usually, non-paid. People volunteer to get involved with this. They have fundraising and all this. And you might think to yourself, well, I'm not an actor. Well, you don't need to be an actor. You just need to be willing to participate. You can be, get involved with ticket selling or fundraising or set design or, even helping people with their lines. You don't need to be a theatrical star to get involved with local community theater. And one of the best things about that is that those type of people tend to be really plugged into the community, generally speaking, and they tend to be super social. Like think cast parties. So stuff like that. I mean, it's worth checking out, I think. So basically, adults have trouble making adult friendships, and I think they're looking in all the wrong places. So instead of going to things that are a one off and being discouraged when it doesn't develop into anything, focus in on these places where you can be a regular face and start striking up regular conversations, and then you will have a much better chance of making friends. That's my advice for today. Thanks for joining. Be sure to hit like and subscribe if you want more fantastic tips from CPR for your social life.